Today, as we continue on with our elements of fiction, we're going to continue looking at characters. So let's start off with the two types of characters. We have dynamic character, and that's a character which changes during the course of a story or a novel. And then we have the static character, a character who remains primarily the same during the course of a story or novel. Now, when we look at the different types of characters, we also kind of look at them as the sense of being a round character or a flat character. Now, a round character is going to be well developed. They demonstrate varied and sometimes contradictory traits. You can take a lot of notes on these characters. You know a lot about them. Now, flat characters, they can remain throughout the story, but they're usually two-dimensional, they're relatively uncomplicated, and they have a tendency to be a static character who does not change throughout the story or novel. A lot of times we might also use other names for flat characters, such as a stereotype or a stock character. Now, these are a special kind of flat character who is instantly recognizable. You see them in several different types of stories. So when we look at how the characters are presented in the story, usually we're looking at who is the main character, who are we going to follow along. That would be known as the protagonist, the person that you want to follow along throughout the entire length of the story. Usually that protagonist has to come in conflict with somebody else, and that would be known as the antagonist, the character in opposition of the protagonist. Sometimes the protagonist will also have secondary characters that they come into conflict with, and those would be known as character foils. Those are secondary characters who contrast with the protagonist in order to highlight aspects of the main character's personality. So when we look at how characters are coming into conflict with one another, let's look at the term conflict. Now, in literature, conflict is the opposition of persons or forces that bring about dramatic action that are central to the plot line of the story. There are several different types of conflict that you will find in stories. The most obvious one would be a character versus a character, if there's a conflict between one character and another. Another type of conflict might be character versus nature. That would be a conflict between a character and a force of nature, whether it is a sense of human nature. Most times they consider it physical nature. Say, for example, your character is out on the open sea and they're trying to survive, they're trying to get home. You also have a type of conflict called character versus society, and that is a conflict between the character and their values, beliefs, or customs of a larger group. Your character does not fit in with the society at large for some reason. Another type of conflict would be character versus themselves, and that would be an internal psychological conflict within a character. The character is doing battle with themselves. There's an internal conflict. Something is not right with your character. So when we think of the characterization, now that we have the names of the characters, we know that they're being changed by the conflicts or the plot lines. When we look at characterization, that is the creation of an imaginary person so they seem lifelike to us. We want to be able to connect to this fictitious character. Now, there are three fundamental methods of characterization. So we have external characterization, and that would be the explicit presentation by the author of the character through a direct description. Either you get it in an introductory block with your setting. More often you're going to get it piecemeal throughout the work, and it's illustrated by the actions of the characters. Another way you might get external characterization is the presentation of a character through action. You get little or no explicit comment by the author whatsoever, in the expectation that the reader can deduce the attributes of the character from his or her actions. A lot of times we see this in, say, mystery, horror, spy novels, where we don't want to give away all of the pieces of information about the character. We also have a type known as internal characterization, and that is representation from within a character without any comment of the author of the impact of the actions and emotions on the character's inner self. A lot of times when we see this in films and movies, you're going to have a voiceover from the main character. A lot of times when you see this in written form, in prose, in a book somewhere, the character is speaking directly to the audience. You know their thoughts and their feelings. So when we look at internal versus external character development, with internal character development, you get their feelings, their thoughts, and their emotions, and that's how you watch the character develop. With external character development, you don't really get a lot of those feelings, thoughts, and emotions. There might be some expressed, but it is not deep. It is not internal. Usually with external character development, you're watching the character develop through their actions, through the plot line. You're watching them develop through the relationships, through the way they act towards the other characters. And finally, in external character development, you are judging them on their dialogue. What do they say? What do they tell you? So now that we tie that all together into character motivation, why is the character in the story? So character motivation would be the reasons, the justifications, and the explanations for the actions of a character. Now, motivation results from a combination of the character's moral nature with the circumstances in which the character is placed. Now, motivation helps to determine what the character does, what they say, what they feel, or what they fail to feel. Now, with internal and external characterization, these things happen both times. You want to know why the character is progressing or not progressing. You want to know why the character does what they do, and that would be the motivation. You have to have justifications for why the character does what they do, through their thoughts, their feelings, their actions, their dialogue, whether it's internal or external. All of the reasons and explanations for the action of the character is known as character motivation. Thanks so much for stopping by my channel and learning a little bit more about character. If you'd like to learn about other elements of literature, maybe some figurative language, maybe about some poetry or novels, check out my other playlists. And as always, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Thanks for stopping by.